my buddy, Charles, better known as Chuck Connor. So as I go through this, I'm going to say Chuck this and Chuck that, but really, technically it's Charles Connor. So how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so glad to have you here. So we're going to dive right into this book because what I plan to do with this podcast, since this is going to be a special season, because I'm doing several interviews with you all in the book, and so I'm just going to spring it on them and say, "Hey, look, surprise! We're having a book come out."
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the book that I'm talking about is the HBCU Experience, the HBCU Band Alumni Edition. And so what that is it's a book of it's an anthology book of the stories from different HBCU band folks, different programs, different experiences, and you all, including myself, get to talk about what our experiences were and how HBCU bands help make us who we are today. So I'm glad to have you, Chuck. So why don't we go ahead and start with you telling the listeners who you are? Like, tell us about yourself.
Oh, wow. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. But I am a native of Brooklyn, New York. I'm a military brat, so I've lived in a lot of different places, but definitely Fayetteville, North Carolina is home for me. And, I fortunately had an opportunity to graduate from Westover High School, which is located in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Anybody that's familiar with Fayetteville, North Carolina, know it's right next to Fort Bragg, the 82nd Airborne Division. And so, the military is a really, really big thing for not only band culture, but just the city of Fayetteville, North Carolina. And so I've always been closely connected to the military. And so, again, Fayetteville, North Carolina is home. And after, high school, got an opportunity to attend Fayetteville State University and North Carolina A&T State University as well. And after I finished my bachelor's in music from Fayetteville State University, I took a job as my first job was a general ed teacher, general music teacher. I was teaching from a cart. So I had a keyboard and all my org instruments on a cart. And the students used to call me the music man, because I would duck in their classroom for 30 minutes and in and out. And but then after that, I took my first position as a director of bands at Hope County High School in Rayford, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes one way, from Fayetteville in the country, and I was there from 2008 to 2015. And after that, I took a position in Chicago, Illinois, on the South Side. We call it 103rd and Wakanda. And I got to serve as the founding director of bands, meaning that there wasn't a band program until I arrived there at Butler College Prep, which is a charter school, part of the Noble Network of charter schools in Chicago, Illinois. And my principal was not only, a good friend of mine, a good fraternity brother of mine, but he was also part of the Blue and Gold Marching Machine as well. So that was a great opportunity to be in that capacity and to serve underneath a fellow Aggie.
Yes.
And then, I was there until 2019, and then I took a position in the beautiful state and city of Las Vegas, Nevada, where we are building, and I say we because there's a hub, myself and a few other directors that are also HBCU Band alums, and we are starting a tradition, a HBCU band tradition out here in Vegas, and so it's been really, really interesting. And so, during my time when I was in Chicago, I started my journey to earn my master's in music education at Vanderbilt College of Music, which is a historic school for not only music education, but some of our band legends like Dr. O'Neill Sanford,
Okay.
Dr. Isaac Greggs attended Vandercook and walked those halls, and if you're not looking for the school, you'll drive right past it. It's not large, it's not a glamorous, from the outside in, but it's more about what's being learned inside, and as I matriculated through that program, I learned so much about other directors and and I mean, Paul Russell, that was the founder of E. Smith's band program in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He attended Vandercook, you know, and so it's just kind of, you know, just kind of follow that tradition. I was always intrigued of the school. And so I finished my master's this past summer in 2020 in music ed, and just out here in Vegas, you know, teaching. And it's been a crazy year. I had a year and a half of regular school. And then, of course, unfortunately, COVID hit. It was the day before festival, and
Awesome.
we got it. Yeah. And so we were really excited, but unfortunately, we got the email that a festival had been canceled right before festival. And so me and a bunch of programs in the city, unfortunately, did not get to perform. And so I had my first rehearsal with my kids in a year, like 3 weeks ago, you know. And so,
oh, really? Okay. Well,
yeah.
so what was that like? Were the students happy to see you? Like, tell me about that experience.
Well, yeah, it's been a mixture, you know. I mean, there's been some programs across the country that have been in this hybrid model, you know, a whole lot sooner before us. We just started. And so it's been slow going. Of course, the kids that are there, you know, and I definitely got to shout out my drum line. You know, percussionists, they are committed no matter what goes on. You know, my wind players are committed, but let me tell you, I like almost all of my drum line showed up, you know, to like the first day of rehearsal. And so they've been working extremely hard, but all of my kids have, and it felt, you know, being away from the band room and being away from the podium and being away from teaching kids in person, you know, is definitely has been difficult, but you know, just jumping back on the horse, you know, it was really good. And I was a little nervous at first because, you know, when you get off the bike for a while, you may stumble, right. You may fall. And I was just like, man, I mean, I've done some conducting workshops, but I haven't, this is the first year in 14 years that I haven't like held a baton almost every day, you know, and it's different, you know. And so the first time I picked it up, actually, I'm telling myself, I forgot my baton at home. And fortunately, I had a reserve one that I always keep in my podium, and picking it up, it was like, wow, like we're back to this, you know. But it was different because, you know, I'm used to the band room being full and we were all spaced out, you know, instruments over here, and you know, and just safety things in place, seeing mask on kids' face, and then I'm having a mask, and I like to talk a lot like all band directors do, and this thing being in the way, and you know, and then I have a beard as well too, and so you know, so all my people that got beards, you know, definitely this mask thing has been difficult for us, you know, and so it's been tough, but I've definitely been fortunate to be able to meet with my kids, because I know there's some teachers that are not allowed to meet with their kids at all, and other band directors as well too. So I don't take that lightly. I hear it, you know, just like, I just wish I could see my kids. And so I definitely get that. And I think about that before we go into rehearsal, and think about ways that we can, you know, be successful, not only for us, but also for the other band programs that can't meet.
Okay. Wow. I didn't imagine, but I guess this makes sense. You know, like your baton is such a part of you. It's like a part of your body. Like, it's, you know.
There's a book that we have to. It's funny. I had a mentor suggest this book years ago, and then when I got into graduate school, this was the book we were studying from, and this is The Anatomy of Conducting. And so it has a skeleton, and then it has a baton in the hand, and talks about all the muscle groups and all the bones and different things we use to conduct and to, you know, convey that message to the ensemble, which we hope gets out to the audience in terms of listening and their enjoyment. So yeah, it's a part of what we do. And when you don't have that, you know, it's definitely different. You know, it's definitely different for band directors that are always using it all the time.
Right. Okay. Well, you know, I'm glad you talked about that. What I want to do is go back a little bit, though.
Okay.
To your first instrument, or tell me about what made you want to do music, and tell me about, you know, maybe your first instrument and how it progressed from there.
Man, well, I always say the band chose me. I didn't choose the band. I was always involved in activities. with sports mainly when I first started off. But how I got into band is, and I lied to you, that's a true story. I showed up to middle school night. They had all the instruments and stuff laid out, and I had a dead set in my mind because I love movie music, of course, John Williams and Hans Zimmer and all that stuff. And hearing all those sounds and like movies like, of course, Jaws, but Indiana Jones and all that stuff. Like I was always intrigued with it. And so the first instrument when I showed up, they said, "Hey, what do you want to play?" I said, "The violin." They said, "This is band night, not orchestra night." So I had to pick an instrument on the spot. And my older brother had played the trombone. So I was like, all right, I'll pick the trombone. Maybe he can teach me something. Man, I brought that thing home and he was like, "Man, I ain't played that thing in years. I can't teach you anything." And so I was stuck with this instrument that I knew nothing about. And I remember my band director, Miss Evans, she said, "Don't take out your instrument until we have the first class." Man, I was in the back of the room with my little con trombone pea shooter, 12C mouthpiece, which is the beginning mouthpiece. I was back there just making all this noise. And my mom was like, "Did you think?" I was like, "That's all right." She said it's okay. Just me being a middle school kid in sixth grade. So I started in sixth grade, and I was in band, and I didn't realize till I got older, like how blessed we were at my middle school. We not only had you had like the beginning band, and then you had like the advanced band, and then we had a jazz band that used to meet during lunch. So the band kids would eat lunch by themselves and then do rehearsal when everybody else was doing lunch. And I didn't realize that that's like not a common thing, So I've been part of concert band, I've been part of a jazz band, and we did 2 marching performances in middle school for like the Veterans Day Parade and like Thanksgiving Day Parade in middle school, right? Okay. But even having all of that, when I moved to North Carolina, I moved to North Carolina from the state of Maine. That's where my father's from. And so I never forget turning in. We had pink slips back in the day to withdraw from classes, and I turned mine in to withdraw from band when I was in Maine. 9th grade, I started 9th grade there because I got selected to the varsity football team as a freshman. And so I was like, man, this is just too much time. But to be honest, like there wasn't a connection with like the high school and the middle school, and so that's what kind of happened with that. So I started off on the trombone, but then when I moved to North Carolina, I got bit by the band bug. Like I was like, what is this? They're playing music that I know that I listen to, outside of school. I can remember the first piece that I really loved in middle school was we did Under the Sea from the Little Mermaid. And when I heard those mallets and I heard those, I was like, oh man, this is cool. But we didn't play music like that all the time. It wasn't something that I could like relate to some of the things that we were playing. And so, but when I got to North Carolina, it was a whole nother story, a whole nother ball game. And of course, I talk about that in the book. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much away, but I just remember that, and like the bands in North Carolina that I realized in the South were, treated just as much or even greater than the athletic teams, and I was just like, oh man, and so I made a choice, in the middle of my high school career to it was funny because Dr. Reed in his interview the other day has had a similar experience. I was like, oh my goodness, that happened to me. I never forget the first band rehearsal that we marched by the football team. And oh my goodness, I got ragged so hard by all of my friends, all of my former teammates, like, man, you picked the band over the football team or whatever. And in the end, it really worked out. Our band got really, really good. We had a lot of people in there that wanted to change, the landscape of the band when I got there. But it was just a different experience. Band was just definitely different in the South than what it was all the way up in the state of Maine.
Well, I've read the book and everybody's stories. It's so good. First of all, let me just say it's so good. When you get it, you are going to be so impressed.
I can't wait.
I can't wait to hear you all's reaction, because you're going to find that even though we all went to different programs and whatnot, there's a common thread there. There's a common thread.
Right.
Way, but so let's talk about HBCUs just in general. So
Okay.
was an HBCU your first choice, and if so, why?
Well, it's crazy. You know, my dad was in the military, retired first sergeant. I did 22 years in the military. And when we lived in Maine, there wasn't a military hospital anywhere close. You know, the state of Maine is a very big state. And so, I mean, we used to drive hours just for him to pick up his medication and things like that. So my dad wanted to move a little closer to a military base. And at that time, my brother was stationed at Fort Bragg. And so he asked me, because you and I, we have a common thread, not only being Aggies, but also loving Tar Heel basketball.
Yeah.
And I grew up, of course, a Michael Jordan fan. But I researched what college he went to. And I was like, man, like, I was like, all right, I'm about to be a Tar Heel fan, right? And so my dad was like, what school you want to move? He's like, what school you want to go to? I was like, man, I want to go to Michael Jordan school, you know, not knowing so much about it. And so I never forget coming home one day and we had a for sale sign. And they're like, hey, we're moving. I'm like, we're moving. I'm like, where? They're like, North Carolina. So, you know, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to be this big basketball, you know, player or whatever. And and so we'll move to North Carolina. But after I got involved into the band, I only applied to HBCUs. I only applied to HBCUs because I felt something in my spirit, you know, and I got to give a shout out to my high school buddy, and he's a FAMU alum, Marching 100 alum, Brandon Vaughn, played trumpet. He was my drum major, and his dad was in the Marching 100 with Dr. Julian White. So we can talk about how long ago that is, you know, and every time I would go to his house, he would have these tapes, you know, from Tape Master. And he told me what the fifth quarter was. And his dad would talk about, you know, I mean, but some of the video that he had was some of like the black and white, you know, family.
It was reel to reel footage.
Oh my goodness.
It converted
every
to
time
VHS.
Yeah. And so every time I would come over, he would always play these different sounds. And I was just like, man, give me another tape, you know, and I just got really intrigued with it. And so HBCUs was it. You know, I told my parents, I'm going for band. Even before I decided my major, I was like, I'm going for band. I know what I want to do. And really what put gasoline on the fire is the Marching 100 camp at FAMU. I got a chance to go prior to my senior year. And I mean, it was such an inspiration in so many different ways. I got to shake the late great Dr. Foster's hand, and I got to meet him, and it was crazy. Be honest, I should have been jumped because I made my way and weaved in and out to shake this man's hand. And anybody that knows, like when your band director is in, you know, going from A to Z, he's not walking by himself. There's some staff members, some drum majors, somebody, and I made my way and I introduced myself and he was like, did you enjoy yourself? I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, thank you for coming. I hope you choose Florida A&M, you know, as a potential, you know, college to attend. And so I got to meet him. That was my first introduction to KK Psi and Tau Beta Sigma. Every drum major, every section leader, every staff member, everybody that made that band function was a member of Kappa Kappa Psi, Tau Beta Sigma. And I was just like, oh my goodness, what is this organization? I need to do some research and find out about it. I want to do that. And so that camp really just in a whole, I mean, it showed me hard work on a whole nother level, you know. We were up at 4 a.m. till 11 at night for an entire week till the end of the week, where we did some social activities. Just the counselors, you know, not only talked about musicianship, but also talked about college as well too. You know, it opened my mind to some different things in terms of sound and leadership as well too. And the goal of that camp was not only to have a great camp and have a good performance, but also to take those things back to your high school band program, those leadership things, and make your high school band program better. And I can honestly say it did. You know, me and a few of my high school buddies did, and we came back and we had like our best year. you know, that year. Anybody knows Fayetteville, North Carolina, that's, you know, E. Smith country, you know, in terms of band. And we were the rival school. I mean, we had faculty members, teachers that were E. Smith alumni. And I was in school and they used to say, who that trying to be a golden bull? Who that? Who telling students that, and we were just like, oh my goodness, we got to make this happen. And so fortunately my senior year, like, you know, I was part of the drum line and I was the drum line captain, and we just had a really good year. The band was great. We went to the Dudley competition, which, you know, was a huge thing in the mid to late 90s. You know, definitely shout out to Mr. Millsap, you know, the late great Mr. Millsap, you know, for putting that together, and those legendary Dudley bands there, you know, and during those mid to late 90s. And, you know, so HBCUs was on my radar. I was kind of back and forth. You know, I love Florida A&M is one of my favorite programs, you know, of all time. I got introduced to Fayetteville State. That was my first HBCU band that I saw, and I talk about that in the book as well.
So let's go there. All right.
Okay.
So you have had the opportunity to march for not one but two HBCU bands.
Yes.
So if you could just kind of, you know, give me a little summary of your experience in both of those bands, because, you know, we've got two programs here. So
right. And you know, I'm extremely thankful for both of those experiences. I was in school for a long time, a lot of personal reasons, but also some things I love the band, and I didn't want to let it go. You know, at one point, I didn't want to let it go. You know, I mean, when we saw schedules, I mean, Christy, you know, you saw our schedules in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, it was like group after group after group. And then in our conference, just the MEAC conference, and then when I was in the CIAA conference, we had some really good bands as well, too. Early Virginia State, when Harold Halton was there, legendary Harold Halton, you know, there was just other groups, you know what I'm saying, that were doing some really good things. So it was like every weekend, it was like, you know what I'm saying, put up or shut up, you know, and then you throw some of the best in the SWAC, you throw a Southern on the schedule, you throw a Jackson on the schedule, you know, and these different performances, you know, was an amazing thing. And so for me, I'm just thankful to have those experiences, because I wouldn't be not only the band director, but the person I am today without what I got from Fayetteville State University and North Carolina A&T. I got so much at certain pivotal times, you know. I originally, you know, it was in my heart, and I remember talking to our band director, the late great Dr. Johnny B. Hodge, and I was supposed to come in 2000. You know, I graduated 2000, class of the millennium, you know, and I was supposed to be there. You know, I went to a few Aggie Eagle Classics, and as soon as I heard the Blue and Gold Marching Machine, I was like, man, that's it. I have a videotape somewhere of my first Aggie Eagle. And you can hear the band, but you can hear me singing Aggie Spirit, like just going nuts, like having like an explosion. I was like, oh my goodness. And so going to both of those schools, to summarize, it's kind of hard because it's a period of 7 years, 7 to 8 years, you know. And I remember when we were talking about the book, and you were like, hey, how's things coming? Typically our chapters are this long. I swear I probably had enough for like 5 chapters when I first just started typing and just throwing everything out there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to whittle it down and just hit the key points. But I mean, it's such a long period of time, and so many things, good, bad, or indifferent, took place. And I got so much. You know, my first band director, my first collegiate band director was the late great Dr. Harold Bray. He used to be at Alabama State, used to be at Bethune-Cookman, was at Fayetteville State, and then I think before he passed away, he was at Albany State. And he used to teach at Chicago Vocational School, which is crazy. I was teaching in Chicago and then learning about that history. Also, you know, he's an alum of Vandercook College of Music. He's the first one to tell me about Vandercook College of Music. Okay. And so, you know, all these things just kind of piece all together. And so my experience, and he's a Grambling alum. To my knowledge, he was part of the first Super Bowl I, when Grambling performed. And so just sitting there and having conversations with him after practice was just an amazing thing. You know, I talk about some things with you know, with him in the book, and it was just an amazing. It was amazing opportunity to be close to an individual that had you know, done so many great things in terms of music education. Anybody that knows the history of Chicago Vocational School, and when he was the band director, I mean, it was one of the top tier programs in the country. They did
Mm-hmm.
everything that bands could do or possibly do. And he was, you know, very, very strict. I mean, I remember scale tests, random scale tests every day, like we were in high school, but he did it on the collegiate level. And for individuals that was a music major like myself, you know, the relationship between the band member and then the band director is on a whole nother level. The expectations are through the roof. And you know, it's definitely a second to none experience, you know, sometimes really good and sometimes very, very stressful, because you have this band director that has done so many great things, and they've also have made mistakes as well too, as college students do. But
Yes.
when they're looking at you, they're like, hey, we don't want you to make the same mistakes that I made, so I'm about to put my foot in your tail
Right.
every day. What are you doing? How are you getting better? You're not practicing? Get your butt up. Get in the practice room. Stop hanging out at the caf. Leave them girls alone. Like, you know, it was constant all the time.
Mm.
So my first experience, you know, when I was at Fayetteville State, it was definitely rocky because he was coming in to build the band program. Of course, you know, things are different from being you know, in the deep South, in our, you know,
Mm.
Alabama, you know, Georgia and things like that, you know, Mississippi. It's different there than how it is, you know, in North Carolina, maybe South Carolina, Virginia. Similarities, but there's some differences. And so, you know, it was definitely a transition period. But I
You were
tell every
you were drum major at Fayetteville State, right?
right, but that happened later. That happened
Okay.
later
Okay.
down the line.
I'm not gonna steal your thunder with the chapter now. I'm not gonna do that because
No,
I
no, it's okay. Yeah. Right. And so, you know, so I elected to, and I remember my dad telling me the reason why I didn't attend A&T initially is because we couldn't afford it. You know, it was a little bit too expensive. You know, I pretty much, you know, again, my dad's retired military. You know, my mom medically couldn't work, and so, you know, one house, the one income house. You know,
Mhm.
and just I tell my students now, you apply to all the schools. And I remember sitting down looking at all my schools, looking at all the FAFSA letters and what I had to offer, you know, and a lot of people don't understand, like, you know, some of our programs on an HBCU level are not as large as others because really financial differences, you know, financial differences. When you look at maybe a small program versus a large program, you know, there's a lot of different things, variables or factors, you know what I'm saying, that can go into that in terms of a growth and development of a program. Does the university want to have a large program? Do they value the band program and things like that? And so, you know, and so there wasn't band scholarship available, you know, at Fayetteville State at that time, neither at A&T when I got there. And
Mhm.
so, you know, my dad always told me, he was like, you know, you're a young man, you have to make decisions, and the decisions that you make, you know, you got to be responsible and you have to live up to them. So I never forget after my first season, and I love all my people that I was at Fayetteville State with my first year, some great relationships, great experiences. But after coming from a highly competitive high school program, also attending the Florida A&M camp, and then making the decision financially, because, you know, as teenagers and going into college, your parents make a decision, you know, you got to go with it. Sometimes I wasn't going to be disrespectful, and my dad was like, hey, financially, this is what's the best decision for you and for us right now. And so I made that decision to go to Fayetteville State my first year. But after, when it got to the spring, I knew where my heart was. I knew where my heart was, and I had to make a decision. And so I drew up a plan that I was able to take out a loan, but I would repay it myself, you know, before the first year to make the difference. I think it was like a $1,700 difference, you know, in terms of one school to the next. And I withdrew myself after I finished at Fayetteville State my first year. I withdrew myself and I called Dr. Hodge, which I talk about in the book. Again, I won't go into that in detail, but I called him, and then I told my dad. I had a conversation over dinner, and I said, Dad, I was like, I made a decision. for the best interest for me as a music major, but also as an individual that wants to be a very successful band director. Because I already had my acceptance letter from the year before to attend A&T. And to make that transition, my dad's like, all right, you made a decision, you thought about it, you got to go with it. We'll try to support as much as we can, but get yourself ready. And so I made that decision to go there in 2001. And I was an applied student of Dr. Hodge during his last 2 years as director of bands. And again, that relationship, it's a lot of conversations that, stayed in that office, in Fraser Hall, between us. A lot of times he made phone calls to other band directors, and respectfully, I would say, Dr. Hodge, you need me to step in the room? He's like, no, you need to listen to this. He's like, you need to hear. And I remember a specific conversation where he called a band director that we were playing that weekend. I'm not going to say the school or who they are, but
because if you say the school, we're going to know who they are.
Right. And so he, they were trying to make some adjustments to what was going to happen at the Saturday game. Right. And it wasn't like, typically, of course, both bands halftime, home band comes on second, visitor goes on first. They were trying to make some adjustments. It was on a Thursday. My applied lessons were on Thursday in the afternoon, right before lunch. And I listened to the conversation. He told me I could stay, hung up the phone. He said, Charles, he was like, this is that mess that band directors would try to pull at the last minute to try to get a heads up on you. Don't ever let anybody shake you or make you change your game plan. You do what you do no matter where you go. He's like, I don't care if your band's playing on the moon. You do you.
Well, like, you know what? Knowing Dr. Hodge, I'm sure he used some more colorful language than what you're
saying. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. And you knew in the back of his office, he had that his wooden stick that was back there in the back of the office. He didn't pull it out, but it was just always there. And just those conversations, it did something to me. I mean, I get a little emotional every time I talk about it, because I realized that my experience, along with others, were just really very special, and some things that that again stayed in that office, and I learned so much, and even in my time, with Dr. Hodge and through my time with the band at A&T. Like a college student, I did some things I was supposed to, and I did some things that I wasn't supposed to do. And I remember there was a lot of times, man, I was supposed to be going this way, but I was going this way on campus, and Doc would just show up. He would show up like I don't know, like Jason from Friday the 13th. He would just pop up, and I would hear his voice. He'd be like, "Son, where you going? That's not the practice room. Get to the practice. Get to the practice room." Or this, don't you got some studying to do or something, like every time. And I don't know if he gave it, I don't know this history, but I don't know if he gave it to our band members, our female band directors, but I know for us and some of the males, he would give us this huge stern handshake that would almost rip your hand off. And if he really liked you, he would give you a headbutt sometimes. And you probably witnessed that headbutt.
No,
you got it. You were on the receiving end. Good.
No. I'm saying maybe it's a guy thing, because
because I know with his late, of course, when you have, and I'm a girl dad. When you have a baby girl, it does something to you. It will melt the toughest individual, and I have to, and I have a bonus son, and sometimes I'm a little tough on him, and then my wonderful fiance will look at me sideways when I let our baby girl slide a little bit. She's like, come on now, Charles, and so it's hard, so I didn't know if that was just a God thing, but he would lean in, squeeze that hand, and give you that headbutt, and look into your eyes and peek into your soul. And he didn't have to say anything, and you knew exactly what he was talking about every time and what he wanted you to do better.
Well, I marched with Nikki.
Right. Yes.
I know that he looked at me kind of like a daughter. I was
for sure.
Yeah. So we got a couple more questions. I want to make sure to get through these.
For sure.
So we're going to switch gears a little. Well, not necessarily, but so we know the band is a big part of HBCUs. So, if you can, tell me more about why you think the band is so instrumental to the HBCU experience.
Man, I know my first HBCUs that I saw, that's what I saw first. Whether it was on the flyer, whether it was at like a orientation, I wore my A&T freshman orientation shirt my senior year like almost every week. Sometimes I doubled up, because I just remember that experience because of the band, because of the band. And so it's the largest student organization on campus. We know that the band plays for sometimes every wine and cheese party on campus. You might have a politician that's coming on campus for like a quick meeting, and as soon as they walk out, they want the band right there front and center. You can hear, you and I had a different experience at A&T with some of the current students have, meaning that like we used to have practice like extremely late, but like out on campus. I remember my trombone sectionals in front of the Dudley building where every A&T band member takes a band picture, historically, through the history of the band, right on the steps, right there in the Dudley building, right behind the ANC 4 statue where that sits. And I just, just see that not only being the largest student organization, like I said before, but it's like the spirit of the HBCU institution, but also the culture as well too. Everything's embodied in it. And a misconception is that, the band is all music majors. There's probably less than 10 music majors, 10 to 20, 10 to 15 in every band program. It's mixed of everything on campus. I remember having a conversation with a previous chancellor and saying, you got every major represented in the band. So if you support the band program, what do you think it's going to do for the rest of the school, the rest of the university? Like that, this has to be the number one supported organization on campus. And again, as a former athlete, and I still coach. I currently coach high school basketball. I did that in North Carolina. I do it out here. And so I see both sides of it. And I know how much football and basketball mainly bring to a school, to an institution of high learning. I get it. It's why your stadiums are huge. But besides the game that's going on, there is another competition or another game that's going on in the bleachers. And when that is how we see our schools, but some of them, let me tell you, band and Dr. Ruff, the current band director at A&T, which is also my band director as well too, both are assistant band directors, because when I knew Dr. Kenneth Ruff, and you as well too, it was a different Dr. Ruff than the Dr. Ruff that the kids get now.
Because he was doing, well, Dr. Ruff was doing, he was at camp when I was at camp, like he was doing the drills.
He was doing drill. I've seen him pick up that flag and whip that thing around, and I'm just like, okay, this guy is intense. Because see, when I was there, he was a assistant principal. And then he would come over and then teach the drill and teach the show. And man, he used to be in our tail, every day. And so when that transition happened, I happened to be on the student leadership group, to interview the different directors. And there, that could be a whole story. And I hope Dr. Ruff puts that book. I hope Dr. Ruff puts that out, because that could be a whole story of that transition. But I just remember that, and we couldn't even answer it. We couldn't even ask him questions. We already knew what we were going to get, the level of excellence, the level of attentiveness, and we knew he was a Hodge kid as well too. So he had that in him as well too, to keep that band program going until they are right now. And so, the band program at HBCU, it is the fabric, it is the spine of the historically Black colleges and universities. And you see it. You go to other schools that don't have that. Even when I was on campus at Vandercook, I wear my Fayetteville State jacket, I wear my A&T paraphernalia, and folks would ask, and these are individuals that are graduates of some big predominant PWIs, and they're like, oh my goodness, I love what I hear from this school. I love what I hear from this school. I wish I could teach that to my kids. These are all band directors, mind you. And they're like, but I'm just not, familiar with the culture and I wouldn't want to be disrespectful. And I would first say, I appreciate that. I was like, but understand this, that, this culture and what we have, it's far greater, than what we just want to give to our students, but it's something that we want to share to the whole world. And we're seeing that more now than ever.
Okay. Okay, good. So I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If you can tell me about like your involvement with the band now. Now, not necessarily your current role as a director, but like either one of the schools, Fayetteville State or A&T.
Well, it's crazy. I currently serve as an Aggie mentor. So I have about 3 or 4 students that I mentor. And those are actually non-band members. And so it's really crazy to hear their stories because they're all freshmen coming into the year with COVID going on and just kind of hearing their struggles and just trying to be a mentor to them. So I still kind of, stay connected with that. But in terms of the band program, it's crazy, and I have so many kids that are part of the band program at Fayetteville State University. I had students, at North Carolina A&T at one time. A lot of them have graduated, from there since. And I just try to stay as closely connected as possible. Recently, just kind of, found out more information about the loyalty program that's at A&T and trying to support with that. I think that's such a great endeavor. And when and if it's God's, plan for me to serve as a director of bands, I'm definitely going to, on a collegiate level, I'm definitely going to follow that model because I think it's such a great thing. I have, again, a lot of students that are in the band at Fayetteville State University, not only that were under my direction, but also Mr. Devon Pickett, that is the director of bands at my former school in North Carolina. He's a Fayetteville State alum. And so sending kids through the program to Dr. Reed at Fayetteville State. And, just try to, of course, I have some students kind of reach out and ask about my experience and try to give them some guidance and things of that such. But as a high school band director, I can say it's difficult, sometimes because our schedules like coincide with each other a lot.
Yeah. Well, I do want to also add, can't forget about this because I've seen it myself. You marched in an alumni band at A&T.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I do that as much as I can. And that comes from seeing FAMU, they do this thing called Bring It On with the alumni on the Friday before the camp, the participants give their show the next day. And I never forget seeing these individuals. Now, mind you, when I came to FAMU musically, I was okay. I was average at best. But I remember seeing some kids, some middle school kids that could play circles around me. So I was just like learning as much as I could. And I never forget seeing those alumni come on the field, march on the field, like they haven't lost a step. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's exactly, because it was so inspirational for me. I mean, I'm seeing people that were in the band in the 70s. And so when I see individuals like your parents, for an example, or other individuals participate in alumni band, I definitely talk to some of the younger alumni and be like, hey, look, I want to turn up with you at GHO just like the rest. But this is important. I was like, this is important. Pick up your instrument, do this parade, you know what I'm saying, relive it one more time, and then you can turn up and have fun. And so, I have an opportunity to do that. I'm hoping, my goal is to do it for both, alma maters next year.
Get in shape, man. Get in shape. Come on now.
I still get out there with my current kids, with my band program. I at least march with my drum majors a couple of times throughout the year at practice. I get in the ranks, pick up a drum every once in a blue moon. I can't do it as much as I used to, but I tell myself, as long as I can still do it, I need to go out there and do that because it's an inspiration for my kids. My high school band director pick up every instrument and be like, son, this is how you play it, and I remember seeing that. I'm like, man, I want to be that band director because I've learned that true mastery is being able to teach somebody else,
Right.
That is all inspirational for me. So I try to stay as closely connected as possible. With our HBCU bands, it's always a rivalry. and so being closely connected to both, schools, I try to represent as much as possible, but people have to understand that, it's kind of like your first love. When I saw the A&T band, the Blue and Gold Marching Machine, I mean, I remember looking at a video that I recorded and seeing individuals and knowing what they did, their role in the band before I got there. And then all of these individuals are close family and friends and line brothers and line sisters and mentors and all this stuff. I mean, I looked at them all as celebrities. I remember rolling up to A&T's campus and hearing Tori Cersei.
Oh, Tori.
And him just laying. And I was like, how does he get that sound? I mean, I was in a car. All the windows were up. Music was blasting. And it was like that sousaphone was inside of the car. It was the first time I rode on campus. It was a day early before camp because I was so excited. I was like, can we just go to campus? Because I just kind of want to see, because I knew some band folks were around. I could hear drums from afar. So again, those things are inspirational. And so, I love both my HBCUs and all HBCUs. I have so many students that are part of band programs all over the country. And I always say, send me a picture of your uniform, of you in your uniform. Because I just remember putting on my uniform for the first time and that feeling. And so that just makes it really, really special.
All right, then, Chuck, I'm glad you were able to, I'm so glad to be able to talk to you. This was really good. And tell people how to find you.
Oh, man. Well, I'm on Facebook. Charles Connor, that's on there. You'll probably see a picture of myself or my family, that's on there. On Instagram, SciPhone5, to all my KK Sci brothers at SciPhone5. I'm on LinkedIn as well too, so you can look up my name up there. What else? Also during the pandemic, I picked up DJing. I'm a fan of music, and so I'm on Twitch and Mixcord and YouTube. DJ Chuck E, and so I'm on there. I'm hoping to maybe DJ for the GHO alumni party. That's an idea that I've been kind of conjuring up. So Andre Winstead, I got to get in contact with you to make that happen. And I'm just on there, and I'm just a constant resource. I just love HBCUs and I love our band programs and what they do for our schools. And there's a reason why we're so attached to them, because we learn so much. We learn so much. And homecoming for us is just a whole nother thing. And so, again, it's my goal to be at both homecomings. Hopefully they don't schedule them on the same day.
Oh, yeah.
And that happens, and be there and be there in full effect and try to support as well too, as much as I can. I got some different things going on that financially that me and other band alumni are trying to do to support, more, because as an alumni, we understand that financially, that's one of our duties.
Yeah.
Duties as alum, we're not there anymore all the time. And so if we can give financially, that can put a scholarship in some kids' hand, that could maybe help them get a meal plan. Because I know what it is not to have a meal plan and have one of our band brothers get me into the calf so I can eat something before practice.
Yeah.
And so, so that's how you can follow me. And I'm just so thankful for the opportunity and that you asked me to be a part of this wonderful project.
I'm so excited about it. I'm just I haven't been able to sleep really that well because I cannot wait until you all get that book in your hand, and you're able to read the stories. So I'm glad you're in it, Chuck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. You have listened to the HBCU Band Experience with Christy Walker. Interviews and editing conducted by yours truly, Dr. Christy Walker. The music is District 4 by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find this podcast on HBCUbandexperience.podbean.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Take care.